Got it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Good evening. Welcome. We're glad you're here with us. I'm Abby Botnick, and together with Leslie Cohen, we represent the PTO this year as co-presidents, and we're so excited to be hosting this event tonight. We know that there's a lot of excitement about this information, and so we're going to keep our introduction very short so we can get to the important program before us. If you are, just as a side note, if you're a K-4 parent watching the recording of this, please know that there is right now a program being developed that is going to be similar, specifically geared toward you, that will hopefully become available before spring break. So be on the watch for that. We are so lucky here at Woodbury to be able to partner with such an amazing administration, teachers, staff. And I want to just run down the list of who we have with us tonight, which we are so excited for. Of course, our principal, Tiffany Joseph. You've just been just a priceless partner in this journey, particularly in this year as it's been, and we're so lucky to have you with us starting this year. We also have a number of teachers with us tonight. I'm just going to run through the list. Instructional coach, Lauren Meek is here. 5th grade teacher, Betsy Brinza. 5th grade teacher, Heather Pinco. 6th grade teacher, Brittany Webb. 6th grade teacher, Erin Andrzejewski. 6th grade teacher, Jessica Chumney. 5th grade teacher, Natalie Mancini. 6th grade teacher, Lloyd Brooks. And 6th grade teacher, Wendy Lewis. So having made those intros, I'm happy to turn this over. I'm not sure, Tiffany, if that's to you or to Lauren, but take it away.
I will begin, and I will make one correction because that is on me. 5th grade teacher, Jessica Chumney. She's not a 6th grade teacher, she's a 5th grade teacher.
And I should have known that because we had her last year. I apologize, I'm so sorry.
So that was my error, my typo, so forgive me. All right, well, good evening, Woodbury families. I want to thank you for joining us in part 2 of our Detracking conversation at Woodbury. The purpose of our discussion this evening is to provide you with a few exemplars of how our wonderful teachers are exercising a detracking mindset within the classroom. Before we begin, I would like to take this moment to recap our conversation from January. Previously, we discussed how detracking has moved within our district towards the elimination of racially segregated classes. Also, how detracking provides all students with access to rigorous learning opportunities. And by access, I mean providing access for all students is not intended to eliminate or limit access and or potential for a student to meet or exceed his or her expectation, but access only enhances the opportunity for all students. And we also discussed briefly in our last presentation, the why behind the dismantling of enriched classes versus non-enriched classes. And one of the reasons our district has made this shift is because students that have previously participated in enriched classes are taught and assessed using this exact same standards. So through detracking, our overarching goal is to focus on all students, but more importantly, to look closely at the needs of all and expand learning opportunities for all. Some of the ways that we've been able to impact this shift in our instruction is by clearly opening our minds about how we look at data to inform and enhance our instructional practices. We have also worked diligently to positively impact our students' attitudes towards learning. More, I would say, in this time and this year than ever before, which has helped us improve learning outcomes for our students. In a moment, you will hear from our teachers about the work that is happening specifically within the classroom. And joining me in this conversation are all of the teachers that have just been listed for you. So we have a representation of both 5th and 6th grade teachers, but also our instructional coach who has been side by side with us in this work. So we are so grateful for Mrs. Meek. So I'm now going to turn the presentation over to her so she can support us in working through our slide presentation. Thank you so much, Lauren.
Thank you, Mrs. Joseph. So hello, I'm really excited to be here. I just want to make this brief because the biggest part is what the teachers have to share with you and the hard work that they've done. And just to reassure all of you, your Woodbury teachers have been just very busy working on how to manage online and in-person students simultaneously while providing a rich learning experience and learning all about the depth of knowledge. And part of that was in a workshop series that the coordinator, the IB coordinator, Addie Toby, and myself walked through with all of our staff in a part 1 session of it. And then in a part 2 session where we go a little bit deeper, that was with our CPT leaders, which are our subject head leaders. And our CPT leaders were actually the ones who developed the why behind the depth of knowledge. So we did some research on it. We looked at some videos, we looked at examples, and then they came up with why depth of knowledge, why for Woodbury. So I'll let you take a moment to look at what they had, those 3 points. And some of the terms that go with those points and what you might be hearing this evening in some of the teachers' presentations to you, I've included here just so that we can be clear on what we're speaking of. So when we speak about differentiation, it's meant to be with a variety of students. And so when we have a variety of students, we want to be able to differentiate or offer varying levels or access points to the learning through content, through the process, what they might construct, and how they make sense of their learning. So there's different ways in which teachers differentiate and allow for all learners to have access to the content area. Another term you might hear is scaffolding. And that's simply like what you would think of outside of a building, right? It's how to get up somewhere. So we're breaking up our learning into chunks and providing it with, there's like a specific structure within those chunks. So you might see examples of that this evening as well. And then extension. So extension is something you've probably heard a lot about. It's really just enrichment activities within the standards. And when we talk about depth of knowledge and we talk about enrichment, what we're talking about is the same standard set, but there might be different outcomes of learning within that standard set. And extension is one of those ways that we can dive deeper and allow our students to dive deeper into that learning. And then finally, depth of knowledge, which Ms. Joseph has done a very nice job of prefacing for you all. And she's going to take a few moments here and walk you through some resources that might help you get a better understanding or visual of exactly what our teachers learned about and what they apply daily in their lessons with depth of knowledge. Ms. Joseph?
Thank you, Lauren. So in looking at DOK or depth of knowledge, there are levels. So in a given standard, some standards could be written at a DOK level 2, or the complexity could be written at a DOK level 3. And what I mean by complexity is that students might be able in a given standard to reach a depth of knowledge 3, or they might only be able to reach a depth of knowledge 2. But when we're speaking about depth of knowledge, going back to the term that Lauren just talked about, like scaffolding, teachers help students help students work through each of these levels by scaffolding the learning in a way that they could expand on their knowledge, and they could build on their knowledge, and they could build on their thinking to get to that DOK4 where we're thinking about extended thinking, connecting it to something that's happening within the classroom and beyond, or something that's happening within that particular standard that they're talking about, and connecting it maybe to another discipline. So in DOK1, it's simply just recall. Recall could be anything from definitions to details to procedures, whereas DOK2 is really, the focus is really about skills and concepts. And so students would be applying skills and or concepts, explaining how or why these skills or these concepts, how they know them to be and why they are the way they are. Whereas DOK3 is that strategic thinking where students are applying reasoning to a given skill or a given standard that they are working on. And they're really moving towards abstract thinking and defending their reasonings or their conclusion. And then, as I said before, when you get to that DOK4, that's extended thinking. That's taking what you know already or what you've learned and building upon that knowledge and expanding it to something beyond maybe that math concept or that Lang and Lit concept, and connecting it to other aspects of the world. And so we have a couple of different ways. This chart is no different than that chart, but in this particular representation, I just wanted to show for you how the thinking or how the concepts or how each level builds upon itself. So again, as I said before, the key words for DOK1 is really about identifying, recalling, measuring. Whereas for DOK2, it's about classifying, organizing, and comparing data. Whereas when you get to DOK3, that analysis really comes into play. That's preparing you for that extended thinking where you have to explain and support with evidence. A lot of times you might hear your student talk about, if any of your students have participated in the AIR assessments, which I'm sure they have, when they get to the writing portion of the AIR assessment, it might ask them to justify their answers with evidence, pull textual evidence to support their claim. So that's that strategic and extended thinking that students are starting to think about. And that carries all over into DOK4, where students create and carry out experiments. They combine something that prior knowledge that they already know or that they previously learned or that they're just learning with something that they might have already known already to expand that knowledge, to demonstrate that, I get it. I see how these two pieces connect and how I could connect it with something else that's happening, in another discipline. Lauren? And I will just give you a moment to look at this because this is also just the same thing. It's just another representation about what happens in each depth of knowledge in DOK1, DOK2, 3, and 4. And so one point that I do want to make about this is when we are really trying to enrich our students or trying to enrich learning opportunities for our students, that's really when we're in that assessment ceiling, that DOK3 and that DOK4. Lauren?
Sorry, I had muted myself. So what does this mean for Woodbury and your child and what's happening in their classroom? So many of the examples you'll see tonight are going to be varied. They're going to be from different disciplines, and they're going to just walk us through a couple different ways. So one of the ways that we reach those different levels is through questioning, not just the questioning that we ask our students, but what they ask each other. And the second way is through the scaffolding and extensions that our teachers plan ahead of time within the lesson based on their formatives that they have done with their students, just meaning like prior knowledge, they've formatively assessed them maybe from an exit ticket or an entrance ticket or group work prior to that lesson and determined what the student might need in terms of maybe scaffolding or chunking or extension within that standard set for that particular day's lesson. So that might be a daily activity you see this within or a summative even. So the first teachers that you'll have the pleasure of hearing from this evening are our 5th grade teachers representing the language and literature subject, and that is Miss Betsy Brinza and Miss Heather Pinko.
Hello, everybody. I don't know why my name says Abby. Abby's my daughter, so she must do Zoom calls through this computer. My name is Heather Pinko. I teach 5th grade Lang and Lit. And Betsy and I wanted to start talking to you or showing an example of something that's relevant right now. And so 5th graders right now are in the middle of our iSearch projects. So the purpose of the iSearch is to give students choice in what they want to study. It's also the beginning research paper for students, which gives them the opportunity to take notes and then express their research, their thoughts, and their ideas in an organized fashion. The first step that we do is either a wonder wall, and a wonder wall is kind of like a virtual bulletin board where the kids think about ideas that they want to try ideas that interest them or that they wonder about, maybe a change they want to make at some point, and they create a wall with them. Another thing that we do is called a gallery walk. So let me show you the gallery walk. Oh, Lauren, I can't do that, can I? You have to do that.
Yes.
Okay,
Moment, please. I apologize.
it's okay.
There we go. There you go, Miss Pinko.
So both do the exact same thing. This is our group gallery walk. So our main goal in introducing the depths of knowledge is to find out what the kid's interest is first, and then come up with, most of them come up with pretty thin questions, and we develop them into thick questions. So we show them different pictures, different scenarios, different areas where change needs to be made. And then we work with them in developing questions that are more complex that they can study, and then through their research, come up with their answers. And this is where Mrs. Brinza is going to show you an example of our thick and thin lesson.
So with our thick and thin, we're going to show you just a short video clip of how I've continued the use of the thick and thin skill. So when Mrs. Pinko and I and the other fifth grade language arts teachers did the iSearch, we focused with the kids on that an iSearch focuses on a thicker question. We didn't want a bare bones. We didn't want something like a biography of who, what, when, where. We wanted them to dig deeper. And through our conversations and through the gallery walk, we started to develop that thicker thinking, the thinking beyond just one page of looking up information. And so we all stressed that throughout it. And you're going to see a lesson now of when I took what they had learned before, and we've now stretched it to a literature lesson that was done.
What was the difference between a thick question and a thin question? It's something.
Oh, Lauren. You know what, Lauren? I can talk through it. Hey, Lauren, you can stop it. I can talk through it.
You can't hear the students' responses?
No, it's real garbled. Just go, you know what? If you can go keep it, just advance it till you get to the DOK slide that the kids had. Can you just advance the video?
Yep.
Okay. So what I did is that I took, they have a choice reading or a genre assignment every month. And so what we talked about in the beginning, and it's a conversation between the kids and I, during the beginning of a language arts lesson. And the goal was focusing on developing thick questions. And what did we learn already that are thin questions about a book? And the kids respond through it, and they talk about how they can identify the setting. They can identify the plot. They can identify the characters. They can identify the mood of the characters. So because they can go through and already do that, I refer to it as the robot stage. That's, you're sort of like a robot. You've got that. We can look it up. And the kids responded with things like, a thin question is, when is the president born? Just little questions that they already know how to find that answer super quick when they read the book. And then we talked about getting into a detective stage, and the book assignments that we had done with that forced them to answer why. Why did a character do something? And they started to develop a little bit of an understanding of how we get from that thick to thin. Our third level was where I was heading them toward with this lesson, and that's to be a judge, to really look, do you think a character would do something, making a little bit of a prediction, looking at what the author is saying. But this assignment took them all the way to a level 4, and they are being known as inventors with this. And I think I refer to them as creative extenders. And a creative extender is somebody who's get to invent their own story. So the kids were starting to recognize that they needed to ask why a character was brought into a book the way they were. Why did they show certain emotions? And so through that, the kids are responding back and forth with me on what they could show in this book extension. So their book assignment is to read through a book of choice and then turn around and write their own chapter. So now they have to dig deeper. They have to think about what they can do to invent something that the author has not thought of yet. So they can add a character to the book. They could give it a new cliffhanger ending. But we talked about being an inventor. If they were a character in this book, what would happen next? And so we're developing that thick, thin, taking it through all of the other areas other than just the research aspect. So we're giving it value in the other stages. And at the same time, the kids are starting to recognize that's a level 4, that's a level 2. And the kids would say to us, oh, that's really thin. That's a thin question. I know where to find that answer. So we really want them to be able to recognize this is a level 3. I gave it the names because I felt to a kid, if I say judge it, that's easier than me saying to them it's a depth of knowledge 3. So I'm giving them both vocabularies, but I'm trying to stretch their thinking so that throughout the year now, I can turn around and say, well, is that a 4? Is that a thick? Is that an inventor? And they start to make that correlation between them. And then we can continue to grow those depths of knowledge in all assignments that they do throughout the day.
Mrs. Brinza, I'm going to try, someone just said maybe I should stop sharing and just share the tab that has the video. So can you let me know if that works so that we can hear the student responses? Okay. I'm going to try this. And thank you all for bearing with us, because usually when we do a screen share, it's within a Google Meet. So I do apologize that we're having a bit of a technical difficulty here. So I'm going to click screen share and try it one more time. And I'm going to optimize for a video clip.
Things that we can answer right away. Who are the characters? What's the setting? What's the plot? So today we're going to take this book report and I'm going to introduce how we're going to do a lot of thick thinking with a book report. So if you're looking on slide number 2, you can see that there are 4 different levels. So now we're going from it being called thick and thin to now being called depths of knowledge. So I'm going to make you dig really, really deep with this next book report. We've done the robot level. We know who, what, when, where. We also know why. So that would be our detective level. And we sort of have worked on the judge level. With the judge level, we worked about what do you think? How do you think? We've talked about finding an inference in a story. What else have we done with book reports that would make us a 1, a 2, or a 3? Say it again.
The theme or message?
Good. We had to find the theme or the message. If we were doing theme or message, what level do you think that we're on? We're definitely not a 1. We're probably not a 2. What level do you think we were on? Taking out a book of choice. A book of choice, which means, again, you can pick any book you want to read. But now we are going to be an inventor. So you are going to be reading this book. And then when you get all the way done reading this book, we are going to invent our own ending to the story. Now, how did I use my depths of knowledge to come up with this ending of Ruby Holler? How did I use my depths of knowledge to come up with Ruby Holler? Jenny, go ahead.
I don't know if I did, like my screen's freezing, so, but, well, didn't you like extend it by adding another character?
I did add another character. What did I do about the feelings? Did I interpret any of the feelings of any of the characters? What did I do? Gwyneth? What did I do?
I think you did interpret some of the characters, some of the characters' feelings, like definitely Florida and Dallas's feelings of the orphanage.
Okay, good. How they didn't like it, did they? Okay, What else did I do? Look back on your depths of knowledge. How would you, were you ever, what would you do if you were or had? What else did I show through my last chapter?
Well, at the end, this is before entered the house and greeted the kids with big hugs. So they were maybe just reassuring the kids.
Okay.
That everything was okay.
Okay, good. So when I did this, I had to dig deeper than just the surface of the actual story. I added a character to make it have more to it, but I definitely had to interpret and dig deeper into this book than I ever have before. Before, I just asked you, who are the characters? What's the setting? What's the plot? Okay, this time we're digging deep. So as you complete this assignment, I want you to be sure that you are thinking through the thoughts and feelings of the characters. Become that character and invent your own ending. Are there any questions on this assignment? Are there any questions?
Okay, so part of it, just so you know, part of it is chopped because we sliced a little bit. But again, the idea is to take them as far as you can into that next depth of knowledge, to have them grow with it.
Thank you, Ms. Brinza and Ms. Pinko, and for bearing with me with my technical difficulties. So the next teachers we have for you are our 6th grade teachers, Miss Webb and Miss Mancini. So I'm gonna go scroll, and Mrs. Mancini and Miss Webb, would you please, or so sorry, Mrs. Webb and Mrs. Andrzejewski, I apologize. Will you please tell me when you want me to advance, okay?
Sure, I sure will. So I thank you all for coming. So what Mrs. Meek is showing you now is a week at a peak, or the beginning of our unit here. And if you can see it, we can, yeah, there we go. Thank you, Mrs. Meek. There we go, great. So you see that there's it's broken down into 5 days, but you can also see down the left column, it's broken down into what we're doing at each stage of the period. So at the beginning and the end of each period, that is our whole group time. So at the beginning of the period, we will have maybe a short mini lesson. It may be a review of the prior day, or maybe a previous unit, or some sort of whole group activity. Then at that point, the class is broken down based on ability. So a group that has maybe mastered a standard or shown their understanding, they will be given the small group or independent work slides at the, yep, there you go, those student slides. So they'll work in a breakout room with a homogeneous group. So those students are working with students that are of like ability, of similar ability. Whereas students that may need possible support, they are working in an even smaller group with either a teacher or a skills tutor or an intervention specialist. But certain slides are pulled out specifically for those students. So whereas the students that have mastered or have shown understanding of a concept, they may begin at, I don't know, slide 8 or 9. The students that need the most support, or possibly may need support, will start at slide 3. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way for us to scaffold the learning, as well as provide an opportunity for the students that don't need as much scaffolding to jump ahead. Mm-hmm. So also, if you look down at the bottom, let's just say the students that have shown mastery, They have completed their activity in their small groups, and they're really ready for more. We've embedded even more material that requires even a deeper level of understanding for them as well. So at each part of the lesson, they are given an opportunity to explore and extend their understanding. So then at the end of the period, after they're working in the students are working in their small groups, everyone returns and we all do a reflection together. So that actually gives us an opportunity to hear one another's insight, hear how we problem solve, compare strategies and things like that. And then at the end of the week, if you look at day 5, you'll see that day 5 is typically, we're broken into heterogeneous groups. So the students that have worked closely with the support, they've grown in confidence, so they're able to show their understanding and get support and share their knowledge with the students that have mastered the standards. So at different opportunities, students are able to both meet homogeneously with similar ability students, but also meet heterogeneously with the entire group, just so everyone is on the same page. So we're working on the same standards, but the content is presented in a different way. So, Mrs. Andrzejewski?
Thanks, Ms. Webb. I'm Mrs. Andrzejewski. I'm one of the 6th grade math teachers. And this is a very specific example from one of our ratios and proportions lessons. And like Ms. Webb said, that the focus on math, we are teaching the same standard to all students, but the approach or the product is where the differentiation occurs. So this is just a specific example, again, to a really small piece of a lesson. The amount of Google Slides that the students interact with and the copies that we have, it can be overwhelming because there are so many different variations. So for example, there was a lesson we did about genetic traits, not so much the traits themselves, but gathering data and calculating percentages and proportions, setting up a proportion. So for one student, the slide that was originally presented, this for all students is mostly a level 2 of depth of knowledge, application of a skill. So at the very, most students are seeing this with just the question and then an answer box. They are meeting this or understanding this concept. So they don't really need that scaffolded support. And as you kind of go through, as Mrs. Meek kind of clicks through, you'll notice that the support for different students changes slightly. So instead of just a blank answer box, other options are provided for students where a proportion is set up with blank boxes for them to fill in. There's also a proportion that's already filled in where they're simply solving for that unknown. So again, it's really dependent on a student and very specific. This is another example. This would be more of a depth of knowledge 3 where they're extending their thinking. And, this connects again to part of the lesson that would have been done, possibly whole group, calculating percentages. There's some various supports provided on the left as well, some digital manipulatives. We're learning more about those. And then finally, the last piece that is really, digging deep into that depth of knowledge. And they actually really, my experience with this was the students like this. They like to justify and say why they are right and share their thinking in this aspect, talking about the store where they'd rather purchase jeans from, depending on a certain % discount or an amount off. The idea behind that, though, is the justification. It's not just, I would go with store A because I like the % better, or store B because of a $ sign. There's really the justification, and that, again, digs into that deep understanding. But thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. A. And just so everyone is aware, the would you rathers are, it's always for all students. And it's great when students can hear each other's approaches to learning and strategies they've used, because peer learning is always very powerful. So I'm going to just scroll back through here, and I'm going to allow, now I'm going to allow Mrs. Mancini and Miss Chumney from our 5th grade math department to share a lesson they did on which is the better deal.
And before they start, can I just add one more thing?
Sure.
Just to make sure that that we're all aware that the students are never stuck in a certain group. So it's based on what they show us, either, you know, that day or that week. It's really based on, you know, what they're able to show us, what they're able to demonstrate. And, you know, we do switch groups. So I don't want to make it seem like there's a you know, I've heard parents say, well, there's a high group and there's a low group. It's not like that. You're not stuck. The students are never stuck in a group. So
If I can jump in, Mrs. Webb, thank you for making that point, because I think that's a great point to make, because just as we talked previously about students not, I'm sorry, standards, not every standard is going to require students to excel to a DOK4, but also if a student, you know, maybe on one given standard, a student may only get to a DOK3, but on a different standard, that student is, you know, at that extended thinking on a DOK4. I mean, as I was explaining to our PTO presidents at another time, when we were planning for this presentation and just kind of talking through what we were going to share with families so that we can make sure that we captured what this really means for Woodbury with detracking and embedding DOK so that we can provide enriched learning opportunities for all of our students. That's why we have doctors, that's why we have lawyers, you know, people, the way people think is different in different scenarios. And so while one standard, like geometry is just, you know, no matter how much thinking I think about it, it's harder for me to wrap my mind around that specific concept. But if you give me any type of algebraic thinking, you know, I am going to rock it out. So I want families to know that if a student is in a DOK2 or even a DOK3, it just, to your point, Mrs. Webb, it doesn't mean that that student lives there for the entire year or for the entire unit per se. So thank you.
Okay, so now Ms. Chumney and Mrs. Mancini, would you like me to present these full screen, or would you like me to keep this in as it is?
Hi, everybody. You can present it full screen.
Okay.
I am Ms. Chumney. I teach 5th grade math and science at Woodbury. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you for having us. 6th grade math segueing into 5th grade math is perfect. We normally begin class. Yeah, there we go. Okay. We normally begin class with an inquiry-based problem to set the scene for the lesson. The example on the screen, or what is on the screen, is an example of one of these problems. We give students time to explore the setting the scene problem. The problem is connected to real world experiences, and we try to hook the students into the skill that they will be practicing for the day. After the students have some time to explore this problem, we will go over the problem together as a class. Sometimes we have the students who have successfully answered the problem share their strategy for solving the problem. If that doesn't always happen, we will facilitate the conversation to guide students to the answer. One of the biggest things during setting the scene that we as 5th grade math teachers try to do is we try to use this time to show various strategies of the ways that this problem can be solved. So kind of like Ms. Joseph said, everybody's mind works differently. Maybe, you know, one student wants to draw a model, one student might want to use multiplication, one student might have a way of addition. We are open to the students using any strategy that they would like to approach the problem. After setting the scene, we then answer any questions, and we share today's directions and activities with the student. And then at this time is when we may split into groups. So this is an example of a lesson that some of us have done, some of us are going to do shortly. So you just saw setting the scene. This is the direction slide that we would go over with the kids. You can go ahead to the next one. And then very similar to what Ms. Webb has shared. In this lesson, all students are completing the same rich and engaging problems. The way in which the instruction is delivered and how the students are working on the problems look a little differently, but everybody is getting access to those rich and engaging problems. In group one, in this particular situation, students are working in a small group with the teacher. The slides are scaffolded with the students. In group two, students are working with partners, small groups, or independently. So there's kind of a breakdown of what the class looks like. And then Ms. Mancini, you're up.
Thank you, Ms. Chumney. I'm Mrs. Mancini. I also teach 5th grade math and 5th grade science. So going along with this lesson that Ms. Chumney just started for us, there's 4 example problems that go along with it. So students are seeing which one is the better deal. So for this example, is it a better deal to buy 220 tablets for $20.39 or 110 tablets of vitamins for $13.99? So they have to compare the prices to find the better deal. So they'd be using division in this case. They have to be able to round to the nearest cent and analyze which one is better per unit. So not only setting up and solving, but then also going a little bit deeper and explaining how they know this. So going along with being able to justify it. So here's a couple other examples. And then once they get to, I believe this was slide 8, after they've been able to, set up the problem, solve, and find the better deals, now they're extending their thinking. So they're going even beyond where they're creating their own better deal problem with a food or a product that they're really interested in or that they love. So on here, we linked Target, we linked Walmart. They can use, whatever choice they'd like to find a product that they love, figure out, comparing the same product, seeing which one is the better deal. So they have to be able to solve it, plan it, design their slide, and then being able to think critically about it really is what's going above and beyond. So this is just kind of an example of a daily lesson that myself or Ms. Chumney would use with either group, whether we're scaffolding for students who may need more support, or whether it's done in a group with students who are working with one another and then sharing and trying to solve each other's finished product. So.
Thank you, Ms. Chumney and Mrs. Mancini. So if you will all bear with me again, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can make sure to share Mr. Brooks' 6th grade lesson properly so we can hear his video. So I'm going to go ahead and hit this and try to make sure we get this right here. And please let me know if you can't hear.
In this lesson, you will see students participating in a hands-on learning opportunity as a means to define and apply the study of diffusion to both previous knowledge from past units, as well as real-world experiences at multiple DOK levels. Let's watch a segment from the beginning of class. The idea of inquiry that we're looking at is that energy is everywhere in our environment. So we're kind of stepping over into a new topic, but it really closely relates to what we've been discussing and what we discussed yesterday when it comes to molecules and the phases, okay? So we want to make sure that those who are at home, you should have 2 clear cups as I use the app to contact your parents and let them know. I also told you all in class yesterday, one should be filled with water that is cold or relatively cold, and the other should be filled with warm to hot, not steaming hot, but warm to hot water. And it should be clear so that you can make observations. And then you need to have some type of coloring mechanism. So for us here at school, we have some food coloring that we're going to be using. We're going to be using 2 different colors. But remember, I said in the email to your parents that you can use anything from Kool-Aid to hot cocoa. Again, what do you think will happen when you put 1 drop of food coloring in a cold cup of water and 1 drop of food coloring in a warm cup of water? What do you think will happen? Aiden, you're close enough so you don't have to unmute your mic. Just talk real loud. Aiden, what do you think will happen with the cold water?
I think the cold water will disperse all around, but not as fast.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Now let's switch it over. What about with the warm water? What do we think will happen with the warm water? Doreen, nice and loud. You don't have to unmute your mic because you're right here.
The drop of food coloring will slowly become bigger to cool the entire cup of water.
Nice. Nice and loud. All right. And let's take one more. Anyone else would like to share? James, do you mind sharing what you think will happen in the hot water?
Yeah, I think it'll spread like faster than the cold water.
Awesome. Notice that students are given the opportunity to use previous knowledge to create a hypothesis. This is often connected to higher levels of DOK, formulating and beginning the testing of a hypothesis based on an inquiry question. Let's watch another segment from the lesson.
Or the same, like, right? Yeah, mine is like going up. It looks like a blue. My red one just looks like it happened to me. It looks like a blue. It looks like it's upside down. Yours is doing a lot more. This place is fully on top right now. Where? That's good, Liam. Kind of want to use it because of evaporation. Or because of heat and will rise to the top.
What are some observations that we are noticing about when we put the drops into these different waters at different temperatures? Eden.
My green one, it like sank to the bottom, but it's coming up in like almost what looks like a cloud, basically.
So it seems like we see a lot of cloud kind of shapes when it comes to the warm one, is what I'm hearing. Cloud shapes.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Owen, you want to share?
Sure. So mine has actually been doing the opposite, but I've been using cocoa powder. For the cold one, it was kind of at the top at the beginning, and then it slowly started falling. But then for the warm one, it went like straight down automatically.
Nice. Does anyone notice a gradient look to their
One it's like red, so I'll put it on the bottom right to the top. This is red, but I'm not sure if it's just like a little close if it's actually there's red.
Interesting. So Eden said that she notices that it's red. At this point, I want you guys to draw in your ending drawing. So go ahead and draw in your ending drawing. Students maybe didn't notice, but as they are sharing their observations, they are previewing key terms and concepts that will be introduced to them in the next activity and will be used throughout the energy and motion unit. Terms and concepts like concentration gradient, the idea of reaching equilibrium, and the transfer of energy through mediums, just like the dye through the water molecules. Instead of being given the definition of the word diffusion, students in the last segment will have to use their own observations and inferences to create their own definition for the word diffusion. Process diffusion. Based on what you observed in the experiment, how would you define diffusion? So students did a great job. One student gave this definition: the spread of a substance in a given state of matter within a given space by the natural movement of their particles until equal distribution is reached. Wow. Creating definitions from observations and inferences is not always easy for students. Some need help fully grasping the concept of diffusion. To support struggling learners, in the next activity, it's built all around depth of knowledge level 1. Some of you are trying to type in, but I can kind of feel that some of you are maybe having a little bit of struggle with this, okay? Having a little bit of struggle with this. Before we share out how we define diffusion, okay, I want to give you an opportunity to get a little bit of help to reinforce it. we're going to use in connection with a brain pop that's going to give us more information about the process in which we just did in class today. So you go over to this side. You are going to answer the questions in connection to this video. Students will recall, restate, remember, or recognize a fact and term around the idea of diffusion. While watching the video clip, students are being formally assessed for readiness to move on and connect diffusion to bigger ideas for the unit, such as potential versus kinetic energy. For some students, this next task went very quickly, so the extension to this lesson is introduced in this next clip. So after you are done, as an extension, you'll see in your Google Classroom that there is a slideshow in which you get to study an industry that uses diffusion and a job that uses diffusion in the real world. You'll notice they talk about it a little bit in the Brain Pop, and you're going to be able to do your own research about careers that use diffusion. By using multiple depth of knowledge levels, I was able to create a fun hands-on lesson that was inquiry-based and scaffolded for all of our learners.
I don't know if he does it. Mine's always in the
So let's start talking about it because I'm hearing good discussion amongst the smaller groups. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't say anything when I came on. Hi, everyone. I'm Mr. Brooks. I teach sixth grade science for the Rockets team. Thank you for allowing me. I get really nervous sometimes with talking among large groups of people. I'm crazy with the students, but I can get a little bit nervous with adults. So I just kind of went ahead and just made a whole video for it. But I did want to say that this year for sixth grade science has been a treat because of the structure of our classes and the structure of the math classes and language arts classes. For the first time ever, I have an even more diverse group. And I have students of varying levels and abilities. And it's been a real pleasure to have the challenge of being able to create lessons that fit the needs of all of our students, but also keep them fully engaged both remotely and in person, making strong connections to the environment in which we are in and future careers, as well as being able to weave all of the different standards and concepts together through our statements of inquiry and allowing them to be as bright and curious as they want to be. So it's been a real pleasure doing that. And that was just a little taste of how DOK has really helped me to kind of expand what I do in the classroom when it comes to teaching science.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Oh, did you want me to show the example of the extension of the students?
Sure, if we have the time. Sure. So there was so many students put together different examples, but I did want to make sure that I kept students engaged and to really make sure that those students who have the time and the ability to extend this lesson, that they could do so. So this was just one example of many of students that went ahead and they took the brief introduction that they've had to diffusion and what they learned from the video and extended into what careers, what industries, what future opportunities are there to use what we're learning at a sixth grade level in diffusion in a realistic job. So this person chose nuclear engineering for a nuclear plant as a case study, and they found out how much it paid, what schools they could potentially go to, how nuclear reactors kind of work, and how diffusion is used with uranium.
Thank you so much, Mr. Brooks. So last but certainly not least, we do have Miss Lewis via children's sports practices, and she's here to talk a little bit about the civil rights summative that the sixth grade individuals and society students are actually currently in the process of creating.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Yes, as Ms. Meek said, I'm in the middle of basketball and softball practice, but I think all the moms on here understand that and the dads. Just to back up a little bit, taking all of the depths of knowledge into consideration, over the summer, the INS team for sixth grade, we really thought about Black History Month. We thought about what we could do to really offer an enriching experience for the kids. something other than what scientist, what inventor, what historian are you going to choose to learn about and write about? It seems like that's the blanket, that's the blanket projects for Black History Month. So we really, sat back and thought about it, and we realized that if the kids did investigate someone and they said this person was a civil rights leader, well, what does that mean to them? What does civil rights mean? And so we kind of tore everything apart, and we did a big unit, and that unit encompassed the civil rights movement starting in the 1950s and ending with the march from Selma to Montgomery. And we read Turning 15 on the Road to Freedom. We were able to see the play through virtually through Playhouse Square. It coincided with the book that they were reading for language and literature. So everything blended nicely. And we feel that the final product, which is the summative, really is the epitome of a DOK4, because they have to take everything that they've learned from the civil rights movement. They have to take things that they've learned from geography. They have to create a multi-tiered timeline. And that timeline encompasses events from the civil rights movement, but during the same time, we wanted to bring it home for the kids. And we introduced them to civil rights events that were taking place in Shaker Heights, the beginnings of the Ludlow Association, a straw buy from a white family to a Black family, the integration of Ludlow School. So those things that they really had to sit back and think and say to themselves, wow, this kind of segregation took place in Shaker Heights too. We were able to pull up a map and show them the areas. We were actually able to show them the first straw buy house, which was a house that was purchased by the Milter family. It was a white Jewish family, and they sold it to the Tinsley family, which was a Black family. She was actually a school teacher in Shaker Heights at the time. And that house is still on Townley Road. So our goal was to have them take everything that they learned, and how can we have them, display this information and then really kick in a DOK4. So creating the timeline, 6 events from the civil rights movement, the 3 events that we discussed from the Shaker Heights civil rights movement that was going on at the same time, significant events from 1980 to present, which they learned about in their book that they read for 6th grade language and literature, which is the Nick Stone Clean Getaway. And the one big question that really hits the DOK4, Lauren, if you could go to that screen, is this one. So at first the kids kind of looked at us, and they are in the process of doing it right now. Like, what do you mean? How can we predict the future? We're not, we don't have a crystal ball. So the question is, what are 3 future events made by individuals or the government that could happen? Could happen is the operative word, and that's how we explained it to them, in your lifetime, that would contribute to the goal of the civil rights movement. So they really had to think about everything that they learned during this unit. They had to think about Jim Crow laws. They had to think about voting rights. They had to think about board versus the board in Topeka, Kansas. They had to think about all of that, and where are we today? Has history repeated itself? And now they can start to think, and they can say, will we have a female president? They can think in the future. Will we have another African-American president? Will police brutality stop? So that was our goal, really, to have them with this question, to have them start to think, well, the things that we've learned about, what kind of events might happen in the future. And because they are future events, they're not ones that they're placing on the timeline, but they are ones that they're talking about here. And, they do have multiple answers, as in DOK4. They do have multiple approaches, and they require that deep level thinking that encompasses everything that they learned in the unit. So you know, we'll see this time next year, if we have this same presentation, I think that we'll have some pretty hardy examples.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lewis, and thank you to all of our teachers for sharing and taking the time this evening to present, but also for putting in the work. And I can honestly say to all of our parents on here and guardians that these teachers create these things on their lunch hours. During Christmas break, Miss Lewis and I were working on the civil rights unit during Christmas break. They reach out for help. They work with each other. It's a labor of love, and it's all for your students. And I just am so proud to be a part of this group. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Joseph now.
Thank you. I just want to echo the words that you said, Lauren. It's definitely a labor of love. This group of teachers has been with us every step of the way. And just thinking about when we were beginning the professional development with our staff, they generously give their time to work on building initiatives to support instruction for our students and learning. And we couldn't be more fortunate. So thank you to our team of teachers. I got a little teary-eyed over here. This is just, it's amazing. So thank you. I am going to turn it over to Abby and Leslie for some questions.
I don't see any questions in the chat, and I know that tends to be unusual for us. So it's obviously a lot to process. So it may be that you're sort of chewing on it. But if you do have questions, type them in. And I know everyone's generously given us some time to go
And I would
over.
say I would say if they have questions for our teachers, I would like to let them get off. So if there's questions specifically for our teachers, if you could please ask them now.
Sure. So there's a question here. The enriched sixth grade math covered the sixth grade standards as well as the first seventh grade standard. Is that still happening?
I'm going to let Mrs. If she's still on, if Brittany's, are you still there?
I'm here.
Could you take that question?
So the first seventh grade standard, I'm not sure what that means.
The description on the description on the Shaker website for enriched math just set, that's just the language they used. The language they use is in enriched math, the sixth graders will learn sixth grade standards as well as the initial seventh grade math standard. So I thought I heard you say that that the standards are being taught exactly as they were before, but it doesn't seem to indicate that. I mean, I just want to clarify. So they are in fact going to, the content is going to be the same. I understand the DOKs, but they're covering the seventh grade standards as well, just as the enriched math used to.
I was going to say, Britt, do you want me to take this for a sec?
Sure.
Okay, so I was just going to clarify. So in the past, as part of the progression into the seventh grade at the middle school, we used to use a curriculum called CMP, or Connected Math Practices. And because of that, it was very easy for those teachers who were teaching an enriched class to take that like first book of it. It was like a small book, and then they would teach that first section of that book, and then the kids would like go on and get the rest of it. In recent years, we've moved away from the CMP curriculum, so it's more of a heterogeneous mix of many curriculums for best, rigorous, and also for scaffolding of standards. So currently within the sixth grade curriculum, just like in the fifth grade curriculum though as well, students who are ready and able to, like for example, in the ratios and proportions unit for sixth grade, there were things touching on negatives, right? And rational numbers within the negative. So that's really a seventh grade standard. However, the exposure and the extension pieces that students were presented with were getting that seventh grade standard within those extensions and parts of those lessons. And so that's really what was covered within that first like book that we used to cover a few years back. And that's kind of a reference to what I think the website was speaking of.
And just piggybacking off of Lauren, yes, that makes sense about the initial. I'm like, wait, there's so many 7th grade standards. Many of the extension opportunities that we give the students, they align well with, it's almost like a natural progression. So, you know, at any time when we feel like we can easily progress the students into the next the next level, we will, but it's just not, you know, that could be, you know, throughout the entire year. So for example, for geometry, those extensions opportunities, we were giving kids 8th grade standards, you know, like 9th grade standards, you know, it doesn't necessarily, it's not like a first 7th grade standard. It's just what makes most sense. And if you're dealing with, and I know I'm being a real nerd right now, so if you're dealing with perimeter of triangles, right, that lends itself to the Pythagorean theorem, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, so that would make sense to go to the 7th grade. It wouldn't make sense to just pull out, you know, I don't know, you know, geometry theorem, you know, like a postulate, you know, but it, you know, Pythagorean, it lends itself there. So where it lends, yes, we will accelerate through the extensions, but we're not just like, you know, throwing concepts and content at them just because it's, you know, the next level, if that makes sense. And I'm sorry for that long explanation.
So here's another question. Fortunately, the equity policy obligates us to provide resources to eliminate racialized barriers to student success. What resources, so training, curriculum, staffing, etc., does Woodbury have in place as a result? And what do you need or expect? And a huge thanks for all that you do.
Ms. Joseph, did you want to speak a little bit about the grant work that we're doing with Westwind?
I think you might know a little bit more than me because you've been in a couple more meetings. So I think it might be.
So two things are happening right now in terms of the equity work. And because we're Woodbury, we kind of straddle both sides of the fence a little bit, because our 5th grade is, if you think about our standards and how standards are written within the Ohio standards, 5th grade is like the last year of standards and how they're written, especially for math, that's important. And 6th grade is like that beginning year. So within the PYP, which is our K-4 buildings, as you know, they're moving towards a more conceptual based understanding of math and moving into a different curriculum. And right now we're vetting curriculums. And part of that vetting process is the diversity and access for all students, so that students see their face within their curriculum and content. And so that's one of the pieces that we're using to vet this curriculum, and 5th grade will be a part of that curriculum. On the 6th grade end, currently the district has partnered with Westwind, which is a national company that works with equity focused in mathematics, and our 7th through 9th grade teachers are a part of that cohort, if you will, and it will extend out because I'm a part of that work as an instructional coach into our 6th grade teachers as well, as we work through with Westwind. So part of that work is being done right now, and it's actually pretty exciting. And currently within our curriculum, our teachers are creating their own problems, examples, lessons, so that our students and their voices, their stories are represented in the content that they're learning.
The next question is there still a pre-algebra class? Oh, you just answered it, Ms. Joseph. Well, is there still a pre-algebra class this year for students who were enriched 6th grade last year, and will they have a chance to do algebra class in 7th grade? So you responded, Ms. Joseph, as yes. And there will be an option for algebra in 7th grade.
At this time, I would like to thank our teachers. I am going to allow them to, I did say an hour, so I want to respect their time. Thank you, Woodbury teachers. I will stay on.
On behalf of the PTO, we thank you all for taking extra time tonight and everything that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
For being so fantastic for our kids.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Abby, do you want to take this next one?
So there's this next question, and I know that some of the teachers have left. If anyone wants to chime in, or Tiffany, you may have heard some feedback too.
Okay.
Thank you everyone for this presentation. Some teachers talked about the joy of a more heterogeneous ability classroom with more diversity. Have there been challenges for teachers, and how are those being met now?
With heterogeneous classrooms?
Right, so.
Let me look at the question. I'm sorry.
I think Mr. Brooks spoke
Mrs.
about
Brooks
the joy.
and he's being bold and sticking on.
Yes, he spoke about the joy of having, a classroom with the kids who are sort of at all different levels. And so the question is, are there challenges to that, and how are those being met?
Mr. Brooks, if you
I would say, so yeah, sure. So I would say less challenges than you would expect. I don't think that there are any challenges that are out of the ordinary. I actually think that because we have a more balanced classes for all 4 of my classes with varying ability, with students of varying abilities and varying backgrounds, that is given more opportunities for students to take on leadership roles. So I'm seeing friendships and relationships develop with students that maybe because of the way that their schedules were built, they maybe wouldn't have had the opportunity to really develop a relationship in both a social aspect and in an academic aspect in the past, because we know that our math and our language arts classes really drove the way that even the science and the individuals and societies classes looked in the past. So because of the fact that we have a more balanced classes, it's really created an opportunity for different relationships to develop from both a social aspect and an academic aspect. And it's been a pleasure. Now, we'll see what it looks like when we're not in such a restricted COVID situation, but I'm very optimistic about it.
Thank you for that, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate you giving that perspective, especially since I don't have much to compare it to in year 1. So thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you for coming, and thank you so much to all the teachers. I know they've left, but Mr. Brooks, Ms. Brinza, Tiffany, Ms. Joseph, thank you so much for everything you did. I thought this was a great program. I hope our parents have an opportunity to watch it if they couldn't join us tonight. And as always, we're here. If you have questions, reach out. And I know that that's been Ms. Joseph's policy too. So
please do. What I like about Woodbury is that with any new challenge, we grow together. So I've enjoyed being here this year with these wonderful teachers in our building at all levels. And just thank you. Thank you for partnering with us, Abby and Leslie, to really get this work on the ground with Detracking and really think about thoughts and ideas that parents might have. It's been very helpful to help us shape this year, as I've said many times, but there were a lot of changes that have happened over the course of the year. So thank you.
great. So with that, we'll say good night. We'll make sure to save the chat. And of course, our recording will be posted, so you can look for a link if you want to share with others. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Good night.